The morning sunlight filtered through the high windows of the enchanted library, casting a golden glow on the ancient books that lined the walls. I sat in my usual spot, nestled in a cozy armchair with a steaming cup of coffee in hand, lost in the pages of a dusty tome about forgotten spells. The scent of the enchanted roses outside mingled with the rich aroma of the coffee, creating a comforting atmosphere. As I turned a page, the sound of footsteps broke my concentration. I looked up to see Klaus, one of my guards, standing at the entrance. His uniform, though worn from duty, did nothing to hide his striking features. Klaus was notorious in the palace, not just for his skill with a sword, but for his cheeky charm and wicked grin. He approached with a casual confidence, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Princess," he said, his voice low and warm, "just making my rounds." The excuse was thin, but it was clear he wanted a moment alone. My heart quickened as he stopped beside my chair, his presence both comforting and electrifying. Klaus leaned down, his hand reaching out to gently tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered, tracing down to my chin, sending a shiver through me. Our eyes locked, and the air between us seemed to crackle with an unspoken tension. He flashed that trademark smirk, the one that always left me flustered. "Enjoy your reading, Your Highness," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Then, with a playful wink, he turned on his heel and strode out of the library, leaving me breathless, my heart racing. As the door closed behind him, I realized I was smiling, the warmth of his touch still lingering on my skin. I'm in trouble. Working as a maid for Prince Eric has always been challenging, but tonight the tension between us finally broke. After tending to my horse in the stables, I was startled to find Eric there, casually seated with a book. His blue eyes met mine, a spark of recognition passing between us. The smirk that curled his lips sent a shiver down my spine. Heart racing, I quickly walked out, not wanting to stir up trouble. The dark forest loomed ahead, but my need to escape overpowered my fear. I could hear Eric's footsteps behind me, growing louder. There was no avoiding him. Suddenly, he was there, his strong hand gripping my arm, spinning me around to face him. His breath was ragged, matching mine, his eyes dark with something I couldn't quite place. Before either of us could speak, the distant sound of guards on their rounds reached us. In an instant, Eric pushed me against a tree, his hand covering my mouth to stifle any sound. My back pressed against the rough bark. I could feel his heartbeat thudding in time with mine, his body so close that I could barely think. His gaze locked onto mine, flicking to my lips as his hand slowly dropped away. The tension was unbearable, a potent mix of fear, anger, and something else, something dangerous. For a moment, we were frozen. Then, with a surge of resolve, I shoved past him.
The moon hung low, casting a silver glow over the forest as I foraged beneath the ancient oaks, seeking the last of the autumn herbs and mushrooms before winter's chill took hold. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. My basket was nearly full, but something pricked at my senses, a dark presence that sent a shiver down my spine. I paused, hands hovering over a cluster of mushrooms, and focused on the silence. There it was, a flicker of movement just beyond the trees, too deliberate to be a mere animal. My heart quickened as I straightened, eyes narrowing into the shadows. He emerged from the darkness, impossibly tall, with an aura that radiated power and danger. The demon's skin was pale, almost luminous in the moonlight, his eyes glowing with an eerie, seductive light. His lips curved into a smirk as he stalked closer, each step deliberate, as if savoring the moment. I instinctively backed away, only to feel the rough bark of a tree against my back. There was nowhere to go. The demon reached out, his hand cool against my skin as he lifted my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. "I've watched you, little witch," he whispered, his voice a dark, silky promise.
The carnival's haunted house loomed ahead, its facade cracked and covered in fake cobwebs. I joined the line, my excitement tinged with unease as I heard the screams echoing from inside. When it was finally my turn, I stepped into the darkness, greeted by eerie whispers and flickering lights. Around each corner, actors in grotesque masks lunged at me, their laughter trailing behind. It was all in good fun until I met him. He was taller than the others, dressed in dark, tattered clothes with a mask that grinned wickedly. His eyes, barely visible through the slits, followed my every move. He blocked my path, leaning in closer than necessary, his voice a low, seductive whisper. "Stay with me," he murmured. His presence was unsettling, a dark intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. I forced a laugh, sidestepping him with a polite, "No thanks." But as I moved on, I could feel his eyes on me, tracking my every step until I finally exited the haunted house. Outside, I breathed a sigh of relief, only to spot him lurking at the edge of the crowd. His mask still on, his gaze never left me as I hurried to my car. My heart raced as I realized he was following. I reached my car and fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. When I looked back, he stood in the shadows, watching. The darkness clung to him, and his intent was clear. This wasn't over. The library was empty except for the faint rustle of pages turning somewhere in the distance. I leaned against the nearest bookshelf, feeling the familiar knot of tension settle in my chest. The dim lighting cast shadows across the worn spines of the books, and the air smelled of dust and old paper, a quiet, comforting sanctuary. Until I heard his voice. "You always come here when you're hiding." The deep, mocking tone I knew too well. I froze. I didn't need to turn around to know it was him. Nathan. The same Nathan who had tormented me for years, since we were kids. The same Nathan who seemed to take sick pleasure in watching me flinch. "Go away," I muttered, but even to me my voice lacked conviction. Or what? His footsteps were slow, deliberate, echoing softly in the silence. "You'll tell me to leave again? Like you always do?" You know how well that works. I forced myself to look up. His dark eyes gleamed in the low light, his lips curled in that infuriating smirk that always made my skin crawl. But now, there was something different in his gaze. Something that made the knot in my chest tighten, shift into something that scared me more than his words ever had. "You're afraid of me, aren't you?" he murmured, stepping closer. I swallowed, backing against the shelf. "No." I lied. He chuckled softly, a low, dangerous sound. His fingers brushed against mine, and instead of pulling away, I felt my breath hitch. His touch was warm, intoxicating. I hated how my body reacted, how a part of me leaned into the proximity I had always dreaded. "You should be," he whispered, his mouth hovering just above my ear. "But not for the reasons you think."